But I'm really happy to be here tonight, only because for me to be able to get out and to meet different people and to connect on different levels, especially people who are all about empowering each other and themselves and doing great things, I like to be able to share my story, especially when people are all about sharing their stories. And I believe it's really important that everybody in this room and everybody we meet has a story. And we don't know what that story is. However, as we get to know people and we start to peel layers back, that story comes into fruition. And sometimes it really helps you to understand that you're not alone and that you're not going through this crazy thing called life by yourself. And there's people out there that are feeling the same way you do, that are doing the same things you do. So I'm really excited to be here tonight, and thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. So I speak, and I speak a lot, but it's not something I really do, is speak a lot about myself. I do that, though, through different things such as social media platforms where I've been able to utilize my story as a platform for a voice for the things that are happening in the community. And that's why I was willing to come this evening and be able to share that and share with people, that life happens to everybody. And just because it's not directly affecting you, it happens. And it may happen to somebody you know or to somebody that, is in your family. And it's important that I think people understand awareness. And that was something that I really wanted to be a voice for, was awareness. But what I'll do is I'll get a little bit into who I am, where I'm from, where I've been, to where I'm at now and where we plan on going. So I put a little PowerPoint together for us. Philly Unknown was a catalyst for me that I was going through some really dark times in my life, and I got to a point where I said enough is enough, and I've had enough, and I need to find something that I believe in again, and I got to find something that I am passionate about. So Philly Unknown became that catalyst for me to find a passion. It was a passion to be able to, for me to be a voice for myself, for me to be a voice for those who couldn't be a voice for themselves or were afraid to speak up because they didn't want other people to think, this is what I'm going through. So I started Philly Unknown, but I made it a pact to myself at the time that I had to go through 30 days at the time, and 30 days at that time was sobriety for me. I had to go through 30 days of sobriety, for the first time, 30 days of sobriety, and make it and want to make a difference. So that's where Philly Unknown came from, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but just so you have a little idea what it was about. It was really, everybody keeps saying it was such a selfless act. And honestly, back when I started, it wasn't selfless. It was very selfish for me because I was looking to get something out of that, and I was looking to get better. I was looking to evolve and become better than I was the day before and the year before. So when people say it's so selfless, I have to say, yes, I understand that and I appreciate it, but in a way it was sort of selfish because it was for me. It was something I needed, and it was a vehicle that got me to where I'm at and to be able to be here today. So I'm really happy with that. But we'll talk a little about me. My name is Britt James Carpenter. I was born and raised in the Allentown area, so I know Percy very well. Just because 309 was the corridor that we'd bring back and forth in between Lansdale, and of course because Q-Mart was the highlight of our Sundays. Who didn't love that pet shop on a Sunday, So, but I really, my roots are from Allentown, PA. Born and raised, spent most of my life there. Which I learned a lot about life in Allentown. It's a great place. I went to East Stroudsburg University, graduated in 1989. I know you're all probably thinking, 1989, wow. Yes, I was a child prodigy. I was 5 when I graduated, so we're cool. You could do the math. It makes me about like 22 years old now. But I graduated in 1989 with a Bachelor's of Science degree in English and Education and a minor in Psychology and Marketing. And I really didn't know what I want to do with all that. I just knew I had to do something because my parents said you need to go to college. They said you need that piece of paper, and I said, well, can I go for art? And my father said, sure, you can go for art. How are you going to pay the bills? So I went for English and didn't know how I was going to pay the bills then either. So, but I went to college, East Stroudsburg, graduated in 1989. I got out of college in 1989, and I started working in for-profit education. I started working in the educational side for schools back then like Allentown Business School. Which was where I started my career, and I started on the education side, and I worked my way up from an adjunct professor into administration because, of course, I realized there was no money in teaching. So I went into the admin side where I realized there was money, but there was a lot of headaches. And there was a lot of selling your soul and a lot of being a person that you weren't. And that was 17 ugly years of being somebody who I didn't like, being somebody that I grew into just because I thought that's what I had to do. And after 17 years, I ended my career with a school. I had moved all over the country. I had been in places from Florida to Denver to LA. And I ended my career with Lansdale School of Business. And I left after a 17-year career, not knowing what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had zero clue. I got out and I figured I would find out along the way. And that's sort of where my journey began. And that was in 2010. In 2010, when I left my corporate America job, I embarked on a mission to be an entrepreneur because I really always thought working for yourself is the best thing. But I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started doing some consulting. Really didn't like the consulting I was doing because it reminded me of the corporate job I was in. So I decided I was going to start bartending again, only because it was great tips, free food because I got to eat there, and it gave me time then during the day to be able to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I embarked then on metropolitan pet sitting and dog walking in 2012. Because I started bartending, I started drinking a little bit more and getting a little more weight, so I started walking dogs. And I thought walking dogs is going to be the best thing in the world because who doesn't love dogs? And I started realizing I could make money doing this. So in 2012, April 1st, 2012 actually, it'll be, we're going into our 8th year coming up. I started metropolitan pet sitting and dog walking. It was something that I just started until I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I realized it became a business. It became my passion. It became a career. Before I knew it, I had 3 people working for me, then 6, then 12, then 15. And that's when the story gets a little bit crazy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. However, I realized that there was a lot of things that were empty in me. Even though I was working and running my own business and living that American dream that people wanted their own business, I was missing a lot. I was missing, really, once again, who I was. Now here I am running a business, and I'm once again working for that paycheck because I want that money, which I try to get out of corporate America. But I tend to forget about all the things that got me to that point, or all the things that happened along the way to that point. And to backtrack it, when I was in corporate America, I was very unhappy. I was not the person that I am today. I was not the person that I was when I was 16. I was not the person that I thought I was going to be for those 17 years. I had grown into somebody I disliked. I discovered a lot of things. I was actually a good kid growing up in Allentown, which is really odd because in Allentown there's not too many as you're growing up. But I discovered alcohol, which was okay, but I realized that alcohol didn't agree with me, or maybe I didn't agree with it. I wasn't sure. But that started to fuel a little bit of my festering of disliking myself and who I was in that corporate realm. So that started to embark a little bit more. As you're in corporate America, I guess the thing to do is you just learn how to party. I don't know, because I learned how to party. I didn't learn how to party in college. I learned to sleep in college. Didn't learn to party. But I learned to party as I was working. And it wasn't me. All of a sudden, I started to be somebody I wasn't, more so, and not like the person I was. And in 2001, I was in a bad car accident. And in that car accident, I broke my shoulder in 5 places, destroyed 2 of the nerves in my right arm that were basically severed. And I found out that there was these really great things called pain pills, that the pain pills made me feel so much better. It was great. I took the pain. Then I discovered that if I went to my other doctor, that doctor would prescribe me pain pills. So now I had more pain pills to feel better. And I started to utilize pain pills back in 2001 in my corporate career. So that sort of spiraled further and further and further down a dark hole and dark path. And if you can imagine not liking who you are, then throwing all that garbage on top of it, it really put for a bad time. So when 2010 rolled around, I was starting to drive myself out. I was really feeling confident. That's why I left the career. Figured that was a catalyst for where I was. The accident, trying to really make some sense of things, and it worked. I really started to grasp it. I started my business. Things started going really, really, really well. and then I met the wrong person, which sort of seems to be like the story most times. And I found out I had a lot of free time on my hands because I was running my own business. I had 15 employees underneath me, and we were making a ton of money, and heck, why not use that money and spend it? So I started back onto the pain pill route because, of course, it was something that I just knew all so well. And then I was introduced into heavier opioid route. And that opioid route led me into heroin, which I was one of those persons that always balked at that, and that's not me. Never me. Shaking my head at people like that. And that sort of is where I evolved, or where I came to. And that all started in 2012, right after I started my business. And I ran a really successful business while being hooked on heroin. I never stole from anybody but myself, but that was enough. I stole time. I stole money from my business. I robbed myself of years of being better than what I could have been. But that was sort of the catalyst to where all this is going to go tonight and how the conversation is going to take place. Because it's a conversation that I was really afraid to have. I was always afraid to tell people. Nobody wants to admit that there's a fault. Nobody ever wants to admit that there's something wrong with them or that they're having issues, let alone admit to your family. And if you grew up in Allentown with my parents, my mother being from a pure Italian family and my father just being from a pure WASP family, you don't talk about anything outside of what they tell you to talk about. So they never knew, and you hide these things and you become somebody you're not. You become shameful, and you realize that you have just opened up a box that you never expected to experience, and how do you get yourself out of it? So what do you do? Well, you got to do one of two things. You got to either accept the fact that you have an issue, or you let it take control of your life and you never get it back. I really went down a dark hole for years. I was in that for probably 4 years of heroin addiction. Opioid addiction since 2001. And that's who I became. That's all I knew. Yet I was still functional. I was still out there working. I was getting up, going to work, because if I wasn't, how was I going to pay for that? And I started to learn different ways and different things about life and different, things about myself, that I realized that I was doing a lot of this stuff because I never got to give myself a break on life. Because I never got to give myself a chance to accept myself, to accept where I was at life, that what I was giving was good enough. Because I showed up and I gave it my all each time. But I think, sometimes with people who are overachievers, and I label myself that a lot of times, you get harder on yourself. And it became a daily fixation in my life that I worked to use. And I went to bed that night thinking about how I was going to get up the next morning and how it all going to happen the next day. How am I going to get my employees together? 15 of them. 15 of them who all had some sort of idea about the issue, had some sort of, feelings, but yet backed me on it. So that was enabling me, because I had my employees who figured we were running a great business, everything was working, we're going to enable him, we're going to allow him, so we're being quiet. Then I had my friends out there who, as an addict, you become very good at several things, and one of those is deceiving people. One of those is lying. Lying to others, lying to yourself. And you sort of try to figure out how you're going to ensure having that support system around, but yet lie to their face and tell them everything's okay, if that makes sense. So my life became turned upside down in those few years. It became pure hell. I overdosed 4 times. I was brought back 4 times. I was fortunate. I'm one of those that had the chance to get brought back. There's a big debate out there about bringing people back who are overdosing. Some people are for it, some people are against it. I got to tell you, when my father passed a year ago from spending 4 months with terminal cancer, and there was nothing to find a way to fix his cancer and to keep him with us, but yet I was able to be brought back 4 times from utilizing heroin, there was something wrong, I thought. However, I realized there was 2 different things, 2 different diseases, 2 different aspects of life. You know, one is a disease that attacks and just affects and kills everybody in one way, and the other is a disease that attacks on a different side and it really destroys everybody on a different way. So I became okay with that, and I came to terms with it. But the 4 overdoses really woke me up a little bit. You know, waking up to a police standing over you saying, "You're lucky we're not busy today," or "You may not be here," sort of puts some things in your head to say, you know what? You need to straighten out. You need to do something. You're not a young kid anymore. You were successful for a while. You still are. But you know, that self-talk only goes so far when the drugs take over and become who you are. So what happened was, I was at one point in my life, I was at the darkest point. I had ended up in jail because I ended up in my car and parked on a sidewalk. Don't know how it got there, but I was in the driver's seat. And I ended up with police and paramedics over me. And when I came through, I heard gasps. What are you gasping at? You know, I was just sleeping. And the gasp because they had to revive me twice. Ended up, oh, I don't want treatment in the hospital. I'm cool. I'm ready to go. Think I'm going home. I ended up in jail for the night. I was there for one night. It's not a place I ever want to see again. And I thought I had to make a change. And that's when I decided to make a change. And I didn't know how I was going to make that change because I was so used to living a life of, you know, drug usage. You know, so if somebody's addicted to pills, that's still drug usage. They are still in addiction. I think that's really important to know. But I didn't know how I was going to really save my life. I didn't know how I was going to get better. It was scary too, because when you don't know how you're going to get better, and you don't know how to work through something, that's sort of when you tend to have a tendency to shut down even more. And that's where I got to myself in the first place, because I kept shutting down. So I became really involved with photography in like my last year of active addiction. I was really into photography. It was something that I was throwing myself into and I started to enjoy, and started seeing all these great photographers out there and this community of people who I realized that were all going through something, some type of, I don't know, for lack of a better, disorder, whether it was anxiety, depression, whether they're having some type of, you know, self-reliance issues or self-esteem issues. I started connecting with these different people near the end of this, of my addiction, and I was saying to myself, how can I help anybody if I can't help myself? So that's when I made a pact to myself that if I was going to take 30 days for the first time ever, go totally clean, without any help. I did not check into a rehab. So I went cold turkey. I went cold turkey on my own. I detoxed on my own. I went through it all in my house, and I said, if I survive this in 30 days, I'm going to open up a place in this community that people are going to be able to come to be accepted for who they are, for what they bring to the table, to not be looked at any differently, and we're going to make a difference. And that's what I committed, and that's exactly what happened. So started Philly Unknown as a community project in 2015, December. I didn't really know the direction I was going with it. All I know that if I could backtrack to when I was 16, I started helping homeless people. Because I was taking the bus between Allentown and Atlantic City, because we had a beach house in Long Beach Island. So the direct route back then would be Allentown to Philly, the Filbert, to Atlantic City. Well, if anybody ever hung out in bus stations for any reason, you know that they are populated with a lot of homeless people. So I started connecting with homeless people back then. And it was really cool, because when I say I was a good kid growing up, it was because I did things very philanthropically back then, such as I was the youngest co-chairperson for the Swim for Cancer. And I did that for 4 years in a row and raised tons of money in the Lehigh Valley. And then at the age of 17, I became a coach for Area P Special Olympics. So there were all these things that I did that really were giving back, that were giving to other people, that I lost track of in all those years of corporate America, all those years of active addiction, all those years of really not being the person that I wanted to be. So when I got out of this active addiction and 30 days, I said to myself, not only am I going to find a place where I could bring people to empower them, I'm going to get back out on the streets and I'm going to empower the people who are out there. Because has anybody ever walked around Philadelphia? Every corner, you're going to see somebody who's in need. And that's what I was seeing as I was walking through the city walking dogs, as I was walking through the city looking to buy heroin, as I was driving through Kensington. I saw people in need. I connected with people. I looked in their eyes. I was able to see that there was somebody in there, just like I was, that needed somebody, that needed support, that needed somebody to believe in them, that needed a smile. So that's where all the Philly Unknown came from. And it all surmounted out of a really bad situation. So with that being said, I started the community project in 2015. I started going out in the streets of Philly by myself with what I had. I actually figured I spent all that money, all those years on drugs. Why can't I spend all that money on helping others? And that's what made me feel good. And I did that. I spent all my money on helping others. I figured I'd rather have nothing and be happy than to have everything I had before and be the most miserable person that I was. So I got out in the streets, started connecting with those that were in need, started realizing that at the end of the day, we were all the same. You know, the only thing different was that I had a place to go home to. They did not. I started realizing that they were out there. Some of them not out there by choice. People always say it's a choice. Be careful how you use that word, because statistics show that in the United States alone, that most people can be 2 paychecks away from being homeless. You know? So it's not a choice. I found that a lot of people were out there because there was a lot of mental health issues. I found out there were a lot of people out there because they were veterans and they had no way of getting help. The country turned their back on them and they ended up on the streets. Sad but true. Found out that there's a lot of people out there because, yes, they're running from something. A lot of people show up on the streets because they are running from something at home. People say, why don't they go home? Sometimes the streets are better for them. And the only way I knew this was by getting out there one-on-one and doing the outreach and hearing their stories and realizing at the end of the day, they were just like us. So in the meantime of all this happening, I started the nonprofit, and we're going to talk some more about the homeless and the opioid community. But thank you. I had something there. It's a little bit. As I started working with the homeless communities, I started realizing that in Kensington, and is everybody here familiar with Kensington? Yeah. The epicenter of Philadelphia right now, where ground zero. But I realized that in Kensington that there was much more than homeless people out there, because in my years of active addiction, that's where I went to score my drugs. I looked like a sore thumb walking down the streets of Kensington usually. Most people didn't want to talk to me. Most people thought I was a cop as I walked down the streets looking for the drugs. But then I realized as I started working with the homeless that there were so many people there that were homeless and in need, and I understood them. I understood where they were coming from. I understood the way their minds may be thinking, and they needed that support. So I started to work with what was called the Gurney Street tracks, if anybody's familiar with that. It was back then Dr. Oz came to Philly and he deemed them the tracks from hell. They were railroad tracks that the city had sort of just left the homeless opioid community take over for years, and they started their own community down there. They started their own village. They had their own hospital. And I say it like that because what they did was they had a doctor in a shack who was there to oversee and utilize Narcan if somebody was overdosing. But they also had their own way of living down there for many years on these tracks. And if you ever Googled it, you'll find out that these tracks were the tracks probably from hell. They were a lost community that were there for many years that the city just let go. They figured they weren't bothering people. The only problem is that there were people dying down there and the city workers weren't going down to get to them because they couldn't. The garbage, the needles were just immense. They couldn't get to them, couldn't get to them in time, then what was happening is people were dying and they weren't calling anybody because of the fact they didn't want attention brought to the place. So it started becoming a really much an eyesore. So back when 2017, when the nonprofit status came into effect, I started working at the Gurney Street tracks. When they turned them over, Conrail came in, turned the tracks over, threw everybody out of the tracks. Everybody was like, "Oh, this is great. Everybody's getting off the tracks." There were several of us that were saying this isn't great because now these homeless are still homeless. You're evicting the homeless. You're telling people who have nowhere to go to get out when they lived there all those years. Now, was it right that they were living there like that? No. But what they just did at that point in time, they opened up a can of worms for Kensington that just made things worse. They took a community that has been plagued and infested with an open-air drug trade, one of the largest open-air drug trades in the country for many years, and just unleashed everybody onto the streets. They let them go into every underpass of the main streets. So now they just took them off the railroad tracks and they brought them into plain view. So that was my goal and that was my mission. I figured if I was able to save myself and be okay, I'd like to get out there. I don't know if I could save anybody, but I'd like to see if I could make it okay for them. So in 2017, I finally had the status come out for the 501c3. We were officially a nonprofit, and I got out there and I started getting to work. I had a few volunteers with me every now and again. Still nothing really stable. And before I knew it, I was having about 10 to 12 volunteers show up each time for outreaches. And I realized the momentum was picking up and everything started to fall into place. And the nonprofit was taking off. We were out working with the community. We were out working with the opioid encampments that you probably heard about in the news or you've read about, that they were throwing them out, they were evicting them. So the first eviction was May 31st of last year of one of the opioid encampments. And as it was being done, I had at this point in time established myself in the community with several other organizations doing the same thing, several other organizations doing things that were much better as well, that we decided we were going to be the voice for those who are being evicted. So we stood in front of everybody. We formed a human line that the media couldn't get to them, that the police had to give them their time, that the outreach workers had to give them their time. And in the midst of all that happening is when these cameras came into my face. And this guy was at a camera right on top of me. And I'm not that shy that I was able to take the camera and push it out of my way. And he looked at me and he said, "You can't do that." I said, "I just did." Came back to me a little bit later, explained to me who he was, what he was doing, and talked to me about, what I did. And I was telling him what I did. I was telling him about the outreach I did. And the media has a way of twisting things. The media has a way of only showing a portion and really not everything else. Asked if I want to be part of the docuseries. Reluctantly, I said yes. I saw the first 2 episodes and I said, okay, enough's enough. I don't want to do any more. And before I knew it, I had a whole community behind me saying, you have to do more. I had the producer saying, you have to do more. I had friends and family saying, you have to do more. That if you want to be a voice and you want to raise awareness, this is the way to do it. So I was very fortunate to be a part of this docuseries called The Damage Done, The Unwanted. They filmed in 3 places, Miami, North Carolina, and Philly. We are in Philly. We had 5 episodes. So far, there's been over 300,000 views of all the episodes. And that's just on the YouTube platform alone. On the regular platform, they're on their Voice of America. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a government-funded media outlet that really only broadcasts overseas at first. So I actually get to see myself in Vietnamese. It's interesting to see that. But they took this and made it into a 5-part docuseries that I had to really think, am I exploiting people? Am I exploiting my mission? The truth to myself. It turned out I wasn't. I got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of calls from all around the world, actually. I've gotten emails from people from all over. And it showed me that I was doing what I was meant to do and that I was okay with doing what I was meant to do. And for the first time in my life in the last year, that all started to feel like it was coming into place with the nonprofit happening, me being able to go out in the streets and be okay with what I was seeing and being okay with helping, doing the docuseries. And then all of a sudden I got this call from the radio station that was a startup radio station They wanted to interview me. And it was a community radio station. So I went, they interviewed me. Well, then they want to interview me again a second time. And then they offered me a job. And I didn't want to do that. But when they said I could pick my platform and my own format, because I'm all about being a voice, I was able to start a radio talk show, which is every Friday morning, called Be a Voice. And I bring on community leaders that talk about what they do in the community to help the community. And we talk about everything ranging from the opioid epidemic in Philly, the homeless population, that lousy G word that's happening of gentrification in the areas. We talk about that. We talk about healing. We talk about trauma. We talk about healing from trauma. We talk about how art has helped in healing. We talk about how talking has helped in healing. So the radio show became a platform for me to be a voice for everything that I worked really hard to do. So for me, I realized it was working. I was onto something. Something good is about to happen. And that's when it did. And that's exactly where I'm at today. With all the crap that went on in my past and all that was behind me, that story has helped me to be where I'm at today. And I'm okay with it now. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have told you none of it. You would never have known I was an addict. I would never have admitted to any of that. But when you start to accept who you are and you get to be able to help others and see that your message helps others, it really is a great way to be. And that's where I was at. And because of what my passion is, I'm passionate about the homeless and the opioid community. I brought some statistics that I think is really important for us to be aware of. Most of you, are you aware that Philadelphia is the largest, poorest city in America? It is the largest, poorest city in America. We're the city of brotherly love. Largest city in PA, but the fifth largest in the country. But we are the poorest. We're home to 1.6, it should be million. Meredith, I'll have to tell her. It should be 1.6 million. She has the B there. Yeah, it should be million. But at the last homeless count, 2018, we were at 16,000 homeless people in Philadelphia. 16,000 of a 1.6 million. We're at 16,000 homeless. And those are just the ones that were counted. Those are just the ones that we're aware of. Those are the ones that are seen. Those aren't the ones that are living in homes that have no electricity, that have no running water, that don't have heat. Those are just the ones that were able to be done. So you're looking at one of the largest cities in America with one of the largest homeless populations around. We actually have one of the largest homeless populations in the country next to LA. New York is even below us. The streets of Philadelphia, ranging from South Philly to Kensington to Manayunk, it doesn't discriminate. The homeless epidemic is everywhere. Rittenhouse, you walk in Rittenhouse, you'll see it. It's there. It's funny because when we talk about homelessness, we automatically think of the opioid community as well because of everything that's been happening in Philadelphia. Because of where Kensington is, the opioid community has been really deemed as one of the largest homeless communities in Philadelphia. So one of the things that they do each year is they go out, there we go. They go out every year and they do what's called a point and count. Is everybody familiar with that? The Office of Homeless Services does this point and count once a year. One time a year they do this point and count, and all they're doing is pointing and counting those that they see on the streets. I could really get into politics, but I won't. Is it effective? Not so much. Because you're really missing opportunities of people that aren't on the streets, that aren't in a shelter, that aren't in some type of homeless housing. And that's what happens. As of January 2018, 5,788 people were in the point and count out of 16,000 documented homeless people in Philadelphia. So what's wrong with that number? Where are they missing stuff? They're missing things because of the fact that they're not realizing that most of the people aren't on the streets visible. Most of the people aren't in shelters. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't want to go to shelters. Sometimes they feel the streets are safer than the shelters. And sometimes they're right. And it's sad. And 25% of those individuals have a substance abuse disorder. is what they deemed it. 25% of the 5,788 living on the streets in the last point and count. And that was just last January. They haven't done anything since. So when you look at the numbers and you look at the statistics, Philadelphia has an issue. Philadelphia has a large issue. And that's why I wanted to become a voice, because I was very fortunate to be able to be strong enough to get myself out of an issue of opioid epidemic. I've never been homeless. But when you're going through open active addiction, in your mind, you're trying to figure out where you're going to live cheap enough to support your habit. And you want to know, are you going to be okay to live in a place, and is it going to be safe enough for you? So I knew what that was like. But I was never homeless, so I don't know what that was like. But I knew the homeless because I traveled that bus from Allentown to Philly to Atlantic City, and I talked with them, and they were friends. You know, I realized at the end of the day, we were all the same. They were great to talk to. They had great stories. They were friendly. They didn't want anything from me other than a smile. And sometimes that's all that it meant. They made a difference for their worlds. So that's one of the reasons I get out there every day to do that. Philly Unknown itself has really evolved. It has become one of the major outreaches in Philadelphia, and that's what we pride ourselves on. We outreach. We just don't sit back and collect donations and then say, hey, who needs what? We'll drop this off. We know who needs what. The people on the streets are who need it. So we get out there and we get on the streets with them. We sit with them. We talk with them. We give them resources that we can give to them. Philly Unknown has successfully helped 13 people get into recovery and reverse 25 overdoses in the last year alone. 13 that I have helped over the last year get into recovery, 3 of them in the last 45 days. And those are the only ones that I could help get in. Those are the only ones who wanted the help. Only ones who wanted to really make a change in their life. Does that mean you give up on the others? No. But you got to be able to put your all into somebody who's willing to make that difference. They all want to make a difference, so you can't give up on any of them. You got to be there for them. It's just the way you've got to approach each and every one of them. 25 overdoses. There was more that I've reversed. I just stopped counting. If anybody knows anything about Narcan, Narcan has been in the news a lot lately, and there's been a lot of disputes on it, as I talked about earlier. But for me, Narcan has become part of my tool belt. I have a kit that actually was sent to me by somebody somewhere for naloxone, and they packed it with Narcan. And I have Narcan with me all times. I have it somewhere, even right here. You know, it's just something that you learn not to leave the house without when you're doing what you do, because Narcan does save lives. And reversing overdoses never gets easy. It doesn't get easy at all. But to be able to be out there on the front lines and be one of those who can see what's happening has really been beneficial. And it's really helped me in my recovery as well. It's helped me to realize that it's a place I don't ever want to go back to. I don't like the person I was, and I don't want to be that person again. And I realized that the people out there, they are hurting and that need some help. So those numbers right there are just over the last year. The accurate of overdoses, I've got to be honest, is probably at this point over 40. I just, like I said, stopped counting. Overdoses is something that happens every day on the streets of Philadelphia. Happens every day in the streets everywhere. Percocet is not discriminatory towards it, you know? As a matter of fact, some of the suburban towns like this are affected even more. And I think people don't realize that. Once again, because they don't want to have those conversations with each other. They don't want to admit that their brother, their sister, their child, their neighbor, their best friend. But these are the conversations that need to be had to realize that, yes, these suburbs, the reason that they're not as bad anymore is because they've all moved into Philadelphia, and that's why they don't leave the streets down there. It's easy access. Do you know that most of the people down the streets of Philadelphia who are in the opioid encampments don't come from the Philadelphia region? Now, the Resilience Project, which was a project that was put together by the mayor, another task force that was put together by the mayor, will tell you differently. I call fake news because most of the people that come there, they come there from outside of Philly. And when you talk to them, you find out Philly also is a very large train yard. I don't know if you're familiar with the train yards down in Port Richmond. They hop the rails from Portland, Oregon to Philly because they hear how great the drugs are and that they can live on the streets and not be bothered. So all of a sudden now, we have people from Portland, Oregon. You have people from the Midwest. You have people from the North, from the South, not just Philly. So this isn't just a Philly problem, but because Philly has become one of the largest open-air drug trades in the country, it's become where people will come to. It's the easiest to get. So we talk about the different things we could do. We can start to look at the mission of our project itself is to provide those who are homeless, near homeless, or in need. We don't define an active addiction in there, only because once you start to do that in your mission statement, sometimes not everybody is willing to help you. Sometimes not everybody is willing to be as receptive. But once they see what you're doing and they learn what you're doing and you show that you are actually walking the talk, they're more apt to help you. But it's or in need the day-to-day resources and empowerment to survive through outreach, education, support, and advocacy. The word empowerment is so important to me because without empowerment, I wouldn't be here today. Without having empowerment or empowered myself, I wouldn't have been able to get off my couch tonight to drive up here. It's hard to empower yourself. Can you imagine how hard it is to empower others? Yeah, it's great to have that pat in the back, that pep talk. But how many times have you ever gotten that pep talk from your girlfriend and all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to hear it. You know, you can talk to your blue in the face to somebody, but unless they believe in themselves and empower themselves, none of it matters. So empowerment for the Philly Unknown Project and for myself is so key, so critical, because those that are out in the streets, they don't have empowerment because most people walk by them and pretend they don't even exist, let alone give them the time of day or a smile. So empowerment is so important. That outreach, so important. Without the outreach that we do, none of the things that we have learned and none of the people that we have worked with could have been helped because that outreach is what puts us on the front lines. We don't wait for them to come to us. We go to them. Because if you asked 50% or more of those that are on the streets in some type of drug addiction or in homelessness, how are they going to get help? They won't know. They don't know how to get the help. So those people who sit in their offices and say, these are our statistics, these are what we're offering to them, that's great. But unless you're on the front line showing them and being out there doing what you can, they don't know. They're just another statistic out there. They're just another number. They don't have a name because they don't even realize they have a face sometimes. So it's really important for the outreach. Education. Being able to come and talk tonight, not about myself or my story. It's education. It's awareness. Learning from what Steph said about how she started giving. Learning about what Sisters U does. And by the way, those of you who have known about the project and have supported, to me, that what makes a huge difference. That's why I come up. That's why I do what I do, because of people who believe in me. And that's why I put my presence out there on the streets to believe in the people who need that. So really important. Support and advocacy. Advocacy is something that, has gotten a bad rap over the years because people have become real extreme, with advocacy. And you don't need to be real extreme. You just need to be passionate, knowledgeable, and know what you're doing. That's so critical. There's so many people that are out there that don't know what they're doing, and it just makes it worse for them. That's why I always say not everybody can go out in the streets and do outreach with us. That's understood. There's a lot of people who can't even look at the videos that I've done, and that's understood. But you all can have a part in it somewhere. You can donate. You can share the posts. You can like the posts. You can tell your friends about the different organizations. You can take a compassion bag, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, in the car with you as you drive. And when you see somebody in need, roll the window down. You don't even have a conversation. Hand it out to them, and they will thank you, and that's all you need, and you see a smile. But there's a lot you could do as far as it could be, but advocacy is so important because you need to be able to be a voice for yourself and for others. And that's what we are about with Fill the Unknown. As I said, we're a grassroots nonprofit 501c organization. We do hand-to-hand outreach, compassion bags. Compassion bags are something that one day I said, I'm going to pack a bag and go spread some compassion. And people said, what are you doing? I said, well, they need basic resources out there. They need basic things day to day, whether it's a non-perishable snack, whether it's a brand new toothbrush, a comb, whether it's wet wipes, socks, t-shirts. I started packing bags that people would like, that people could utilize, that they could get something out of. So we pack the compassion bags, we hand them out. We go out in the streets, we try to write a message on all the bags possible, as you see in the front there. As a matter of fact, there's one of the wagons being utilized. We go out in full force, we'll take the compassion bags out, and the compassion bags are always different. They're not the same each time. They could be something different. Sometimes it's, socks and underwear and t-shirts and chapstick. Sometimes it's all snacks and sometimes junk food. Sometimes it's just a book, a crossword puzzle book. We do a lot of different things, but we pack compassion bags, we take them out, and that's something that I always encourage everybody to do. If you want to help, but you don't know how to do it, you can make compassion bags up. Put a bag in the car. Carry a case of water with you on a hot day. Goes a long way. I mean, my mouth is dry in here. Can you imagine when it's 100 degrees out and they're outside? It's bad. It gets really bad. But part of what we do with the project is we help the community and we educate the community on how to work with those in need. Because not everybody understands how to do that. We joke a lot. We have those that come out that we call the coddlers that are, talking to them as if they're infantile or talking to somebody in need as if, they're a young child. And that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to meet them where they're at. And that's so important. I think we as people forget to do that. We don't meet people where they're at. We tend to want to bring people up to where we are. And with people in need, you've got to meet them where they're at. So that's another thing that we do is we try to teach the community that type of advocacy as you go out and you do it. The Fill the Unknown Project, one good thing about the project itself is we have partnered with many great groups and organizations. Sisters U is one of them. I mean, we have received donations from some of you in here. I know that because when I found out the name, of course, I had to go do my due diligence. I had to ask Steph, or I had to see if she was friends with that person or where they came from. We do a lot of that work with different organizations. In the one picture to the far left, they are two. There's a third person. She's cut off, but there's two main people in that picture with me that are real important to what we do. We all fight homelessness and the opioid epidemic in our own ways, but on different levels. To the left is a lady named Catherine Pennepacker. Catherine does what's called the Healing Blanket Project. When she was younger, she had a surgery and she was terrified of it. And her mother gave her this blanket and said it was a healing blanket. And it was something that she knitted with her mother. So Catherine learned to heal through that blanket and take away the trauma of that surgery and what had happened to her. So she now bestows that upon the opioid and the homeless community in the Memorial Arts storefront. She brought the Healing Blanket Project to the storefront, and she does this called Tuesday Teas and Textiles. And every Tuesday morning, it's an open studio sanctuary for those who are in need to just come in off the streets or from the community and work and do some arts and crafts and just learn to heal through textiles. And that's Catherine. To the right of me on the first picture is a lady named Roz Pichardo. Roz Pichardo is basically like a sister to me. She is my partner in community. She's my partner in crime. We balance each other very well. She started an organization years ago called Operation Save Our City. Operation Save Our City was set up to help those who were experiencing gun violence aspects. She set it up to go after to help the victims' families go after the shooters and bring them to justice. She herself was a victim of domestic violence. Her brother was shot and killed, and they never found the shooter. She was attempted homicide by her boyfriend. Her sister had a self-inflicted gunshot wound, so she became a voice for those, with the gun violence. She has now helped us out with the opioid community, and it's been really great meshing. So I've been really fortunate to partner with some really great organizations on the front lines doing some really great things. And I've been fortunate to meet some really great people. The second picture there is something that Steph could probably attest to, is in our warehouse space, those are donations that come in on the regular. We get donations each week that amount to that, if not more. And then it's sorting them, going through them. So that's some of our donations. The next picture is some of our outreach workers, some of our volunteers. The Philly Unknown Project has evolved into a board of directors finally. The legitimacy of the 501c is setting in, so it's really awesome. But some of them are my board of directors. But they are the heartbeat of who really helps go out. Without the volunteers, I couldn't do a lot of that I do. However, a lot of the outreach I do on my own, I do during the week. So a lot of the Philly Unknown Project isn't about me. It's about the community. It's about us. And I very rarely use the word I or me. I talk about we and how we did this. And together, it's us making a difference. Because that's really what it is. I'm going to tell you a story about the gentleman in this picture first before I talk about the statistics. The gentleman in that picture, I know I'm running late. I'm sorry. I'm running real late. Holy heck. His name is Mo. He's one of the first persons I ever helped with active addiction. Mo, I found him on the street, almost dead. Got him into his abandonmenium, which was a boarded up house off of Germantown Avenue. And I formed a relationship with Mo, and I've seen Mo now since 2012, almost once a week. So that's Mo over there. But Philly Unknown Project to date, we distribute over 10,000 compassion bags. We have over 5,000 sneakers due to our Philly on its Feet project. Philly on its Feet initiative is dealing with sneakers that I receive from all over the country, from marathons, range from Boston Marathon to the New York City Marathon to the Philly Marathon. Cover Up Philly is blankets, jackets, hats, scarves, the winter. So those are some of the initiatives that we do for the project itself. There's so much coming in 2019. We just purchased a van. We just got our first hub of operations that is our own, right in Kensington, in the heart of it. We're working with the Diocese of Philadelphia for a project that I can't tell the name of it yet, but the bishop has funded a lot of money to us to open a storefront to help people, and a storefront. So there's so much more to come. And people always say, how can you help? There are all different ways. Once again, share. Once again, have those conversations. Educate yourselves. If you want to help us, feel free to reach out via email. You can talk to me. We have an Amazon wish list. I can give you different resources that you may need. But just have those connections, have those, those conversations. And I'm sorry I ran over. But there's a lot to say, and I appreciate you having me this evening and hearing it. I know a lot of it was a lot to handle in a short period of time. But what it all boils down to is if you can make a difference in your own life, you can make a difference in everybody else's. And that's what I try to do each day, something little to make a difference. So thank you for having me here and talking about it tonight. Appreciate it.